And today we're going to be talking about project performance. And the first thing I want to show you is you'll notice on the screen here that with our slides, you'll notice that we have put the two logos on here. Most of you who are registered with Project Management Institute know that Project Management Institute is going through a change as of December 31st, and the registered education provider, which we have been one for years, will be finishing December 31st, and they have a new program called the Authorized Training Partner. And so the Authorized Training Partner program has a lot more restrictions and a lot more criteria associated with it. And so the logo you see on your left, the badge you see on your left, that's for the Project Management Institute Authorized Training Partner. And so we've already jumped through the hoops for this. We're one of the first organizations in the nation to do this. And then what you probably have heard too, if you're active in your chapter, is that after December 31st, all material for the PMP Bootcamp has to be purchased through PMI, and you have to be trained by an authorized training PMP exam prep trainer. And so that's the second badge that you see here. I jumped through that hoop, and so we're ready to go. And so all of our future training on the PMP is going to be going through using their material. And so even for this year, we're going to be using their material to finish out this year. And the material they have right now will qualify for the test. So I'm hoping that the passing scores, we've had a phenomenal passing score, but I'm hoping that our passing scores will even go up even further. But so anyway, we're right where we need to be. A lot of companies out there are still scrambling, trying to jump through the hoops in order to be a Project Management Institute authorized training partner. And so I'm glad to have all that stuff behind us, and that way we're ready to go for 2021 when all of this fully switches over. So that's a good thing. So let me thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to be talking about improving project performance. Now let's define performance to make sure that we lay the foundation for what we're going to be talking about here. Performance is the completion of tasks and actions as prescribed by a job description, a process, a norm. A norm would be something like a behavior, policies, or handbooks. So when we talk about performance, you're going to notice that we're going to talk about performance of your project, and we're going to hit that. But you'll notice also that we'll talk about a little bit about performance of people, because sometimes your project performance is going to be measuring all of the different aspects of your project, which is fine. But the downside is that your people are overworked, your people are burnt out, and different things like that. Now, here's some benefits of having a performance system. Performance systems focus on giving feedback on strengths and weaknesses. Performance systems focus on increasing individual performance with better processes and benchmarking. And performance systems give insights into additional worker resource planning. All of this is very important because what you're looking at is being able to run your project as fast as you possibly can to meet the objectives as put out in the schedule or put out in the whatever time frame you're using. And you also want to be able to utilize your people, but you're not wanting to burn your people out. Because most of our people, unless you're working in a 100% Scrum atmosphere, most of our people are working on multiple projects. It's real easy for us to over allocate those folks if we're not very careful with that. Now, why managers will resist performance management? Sometimes there's a little bit of competition between the manager and the project manager over the resources. If you're in a traditional organization where you have where it's a very formal organization, then what happens is you probably don't own your resources if you're a project manager. So you're having to ask for those resources from someone else. So managers sometimes, though, the reason why they resist performance is they play the role of that performance is as high as it can possibly be. So sometimes they're in a comfort zone. We all get in comfort zones, so it's not just managers. Project managers do. Even as companies, we can get in a comfort zone and not be watching what's coming down the pipeline as what we're needing to do. Let me give you a real simple example. You're on a Zoom call with me today, but what happens so many times is that people who were not anticipating that technology was going to be taking over are just now starting to get into the technology. And so what's happening is they're struggling to try to make their connections and learn how to do technology. And so that's what we're talking about. We're in our comfort zone of it. We're always going to have face-to-face meetings. We're always going to be on site at the company. We're always going to have all of these pieces in place. And then you have a pandemic happen, and now we're all at home. And of course, this has changed everything across the world for good, because we've had to use technology for this. Managers sometimes will think their workers are performing as high as possible. They lack confrontation skills. You run across managers and project managers who lack confrontation skills. They're fearful of the people, fearful of talking about some of those things. You run across managers who look at performance management as holding somebody's hand rather than trying to get the best out of somebody and aligning them someplace that's going to be very beneficial for them. Also, managers feel that they might be too busy to focus on performance, that they're working so hard that they don't have time to watch someone else's performance. And I don't understand that at all, but nevertheless, you will find people like that. And managers have different standards for themselves compared to their staff. I want you to work hard, but I'm not going to work very hard. I want you to overperform, but I'm going to underperform. And so all of those things make a huge difference when we're talking about this issue of performance. Now, one of the things that we have to kind of come together on is you've got to begin with the new workers. Providing an overview. So let's say I've got new workers who are coming to work for the organization or on my project team or for me, whatever the case may be. And let's say maybe they don't even report to me, but they're on my project team. What is it that we want to do? Well, you want to provide some type of overview of the culture, the philosophy of the team, of what the team should be or what you're wanting the team to be to that team member. And if it's a brand new team that you're setting down with, give that philosophy to everybody in the first meeting that you have with your team. Explain or plan for gaining needed data. Discuss overall processes that are going to be used. There are some that are more mandated, some that might be more versatile. Point out information about each coworker that you're expecting, where you're expecting them to work or what they shine in, and that you're expecting help from them in certain areas. Discuss discipline or performance levels if that's appropriate in that situation. Once again, performance levels in most cases can be talked about and are talked about because you're wanting people to show up with certain reports, you're wanting them to attend the meetings, you're wanting them to, that if there's a problem, not to wait until the next meeting to let you know, but to contact you and get you in the loop on this thing early. All of those things a project manager would want from their people. Point out training when the training is planned. Maybe you're going to do some training in some of your meetings, even if the training is only 15 minutes. The point is you're doing a little bit of training with these people. Now, there's some phases of performance management that will help us a little bit. One would be performance planning, performance communication, data gathering and documentation, evaluating the performance, both of the project and of the people, and then performance diagnosis. In other words, if there is a problem, how are we doing with diagnosing the problem of that performance and how we're going to be able to take it to that next level? Because that's going to be very important for the project and for the team as well. So let's start with performance planning. The advantage of performance planning is it allows you to detect performance issues and create changes to correct them. It institutes steps for making good workers better. So this is assuming that you've got a decent worker, and most of you do. You've hired people, and of course everybody has different skill sets and different levels and all of these different things. But the point is, normally you've hired a good person, but maybe they don't have the skill set. Not having a skill set doesn't make them a bad employee. It makes them an employee that needs training. So one of the advantages is that you hire a good worker and then you start working with that worker to build them up. Every one of us on the call have been coached by somebody, has invested into our life to be able to help us have these skills. And so that's one of the things that we're needing to do with other people. Now, performance planning exercise that we get into sometimes is on one side, we would say performance issue, how has performance changed in the last 24 months? On the other side, how to solve it. What can be done to assist in reinforcing performance? Now, if you look at performance in your organizations, and we've got a lot of people on the call right here, but if you were looking at performance in your organization, let me ask that question to you personally, and it's rhetorical. I'm not expecting you to answer this, but how has performance changed in the last 24 months where you work? And what can be done to assist in reinforcing performance where you work? And sometimes it's a bigger challenge than it is at other places. Some cultures just fight against it. I can still remember being in college, and I was a welder in the summer, and I'd build grain tanks. And so I'd go out to the locations, and I'd live there through the summer, and I'd weld, and I'd build grain tanks. And so I went to this new job, and of course I'm 18, 19, right in that age. And I'm a worker. I mean, I'm in great shape. And so, very much like I am right now. And so I'm a good worker. And so, man, I'm just out here welding to beat the band. And this guy comes up and he kicks my foot and he walks over to me. And he said, "You need to slow down." And he said, "We don't work that hard here." And he was one of the union supervisors, and he told me to slow down. And he said, "I don't care if we ever finish this job." He said, "But you need to slow down." And so I was reprimanded for overperforming because my thought was, man, I want to be a good worker. I'm only here for the summer. I appreciate these guys giving me a job for the summer and everything. But yeah, I got reprimanded for overworking in that situation. All right, so let's talk about some specifics about job analysis a little bit. Now, people who have human resource connections, or if you've taken a human resource course, you'll know that in college or the university setting, they talk about these particular pieces, but sometimes we forget about this. Every job that's in our organization has been examined through new eyes of looking at all the different pieces of that. And so, for an example, developing specific criteria. If you're doing a job analysis of somebody on your team, what is it that you're wanting them to do? What is it that you're wanting them to be connected with? And so, like for an example, the strategic plan will drive some of the new people. And the reason being that strategic plan is going to have our strategic goals and objectives. And so whatever we're trying to achieve, we look and see, do we have the resources to do that? Current job expectations. So if you're used to having 50 projects a year, and now all of a sudden your company is growing and you've got 100 projects coming down the pipeline each year, you're probably going to notice that you're going to have to beef up your resources. What about the roles and responsibilities? Roles and responsibilities will change based on what's happening with people. The culture can change based on, we've just seen a drastic change with that, as you've seen baby boomers retire and leave the organizations, and you've seen Generation X's and millennials come on in, and now you're seeing Z's come on in. You're seeing a whole different culture, the mindset. It's not bad, it's just different. And we've got to be able to adjust for that. And then what's our value system? The old value system was, I want to see you, I want you here working here, I want us all in the same building. New value system, we had to throw that out the door because of what's happening here. And I think many companies will be changed forever because of that. And so the value system is, can you be productive and do it through technology? The other side of this is going to be multidimensional objectives. So most people today have different objectives connected to themselves as well. You've got a career path, you've got roles and responsibilities, and you've got organizational goals. That's a driving part of that. But every person has these for themselves as well. Every millennial on this call, I bet you, has an updated LinkedIn report and an updated resume at all times. And so what happens is that their mindset is they're always looking to be able to be prepared for a job. And they should be, because organizations have not stuck with people today like they did 30 years ago. 30 years ago, organizations, you went to work for an organization, you were there for a long time. Today, organizations are not committed to people overall. And so I'm making some broad generalities, but overall, you know what I'm talking about. And so millennials have seen that. And so their career path, they're constantly looking to see how they can better their career path for them and their families. And so they're always updating a resume. They're always updating LinkedIn. They've got all of those things updated as much as they possibly can. So then why does performance suffer then with people? If people are wanting to do good, and most of the time they do want to do a good job, one of the books that I was reading recently, and I thought this was a cool thing, this is a book called Managing with Carrots. And so here's a quote that this author gave, that Gosnick gave. He said, "Many employees distrust management. They believe coworkers first, immediate supervisors next, and upper management almost always last. One study indicated 43% of all employees are not just suspicious, they firmly believe that senior management lies and is trying to cheat them. In contrast, a similar study showed that 96% of the people believe their immediate supervisor is always or normally telling the truth." So what I thought was interesting about this is 96% will believe their immediate supervisor, but the further up the organization we go, the less we believe it. And then some companies, people just flat out don't believe management at all, and it's normally based on what has happened in the past. And so if we're wanting people to have high trust and high value system in our organization, but I'm always lying to everybody, and I'm lying to my staff, then that's going to inhibit all of this, because they're not going to believe any of those things. So how organizations sometimes will set workers up for failure, and they don't even think about it, but it happens all the time. The first piece would be expectations are not clear up front. And this can happen when when everybody means for it not to be happening. Everybody assumes everybody knows what they're supposed to do, but yet nobody has actually told that worker what they're supposed to do or explained it. Training's neglected or sporadic, and of course millennials want more training because once again they're looking at their career path. Z's, it looks like, are going to have a very similar connection to that because they're wanting to be trained and wanting to be as versatile as they can be. Limited information for worker decision making because management's still making most of the decisions. Insufficient equipment or tools, unrealistic changes, or insufficient time. My goodness, that's right out of the project management books of what we see is happening. Outdated policy and procedures. We're doing it one way, but the policy says to do it a different way, but nobody's updated the policy or procedures. We see this is everyday stuff that we're dealing with in our organizations. Now, performance planning includes a component of teamwork. So teamwork allows us to balance delegation of work. So in other words, I'm not working very little and you're the workhorse. I'm not the slug and you're the workhorse. That should not be happening on our projects. Also, allowing employees to give ideas on issues or problems, communicate needed information for teams to make decisions, and monitor and give feedback. And so as the years have gone by, I've learned how when I'm not getting enough feedback, not to just sit back and wait, but to send an email and ask. This morning I sent an email that I had sent out last week, and the person did not respond and give me the information I needed for a project I'm working on for them. So I sent an email, and at the top I put second email. And somebody goes, well, somebody might think, well, I would never do that. I'm just making sure that I get prioritized differently so that I get the information back. Not upset, but I need information from that person. And if this is not the right person, then say it in the next email. Because if I don't hear from him here, guess what the next email is going to do? Third email. And you don't have to be a jerk. You're saying nice stuff. Hey, I hope this finds you well. Fourth email, but I want information, and that's who I'm supposed to be communicating with. Tell me that it's not you, and you'll get no more of my emails. 15th email, so all I'm doing is making sure that they're cognizant, and usually by the third one I'm going to get the information or at least direction on what I'm asking. Now, this also requires that we have performance communication. Now, performance communication actually has steps. Many of you have read the book, Fifth Discipline, from several years ago by Peter Senge. And Peter Senge talks about creating that shared vision, that buy-in, but it's basically a series of steps. We tell, we sell, we test, we consult. All of those components have to be there in order for somebody to have that vision and that buy-in. And here's the thing that's interesting about this is that you can do this through training. And many organizations have done this. For an example, Starbucks they've got nothing but champions on their team who want to support their organization. And so you've got, they believe that. But it's not just something like that. For example, Gap. I can still remember my son working at Gap in college. And they spent 2 days talking about the vision, mission, and goals of the organization. Now you're talking about a college kid who's going to work part-time at the Gap. I was impressed. They got him so excited about their mission and vision. And of course, if you think about from their standpoint, they have invested into those young people, and those young people are working for Gap, and they're less likely to change because they've been given some power, they've been given authority. I remember him coming home telling me that he could make an exchange for up to $2,000 without management approval. And I just started laughing, and I'm thinking the Gap is really, they've got a great idea going here because they've made that college kid feel like they have bought into their vision, their mission, and they've given them some authority. And he worked there all through college, compared to many organizations who have college kids who change over and over again. They can't keep them. Now, there's some ways to communicate performance and expectations, though. One of those is going to be job descriptions, obviously, but many organizations, the job description is so vague today, and it almost has to be, because our projects are so different. And so core competencies is another, job indicators, policies, procedures, briefings, strategic objectives. For an example, the average school teacher we know had to be educated and be a person who was just stellar in their craft and in their field. And now this morning, or let me say next week, not only are they having to be stellar in their craft and in their field, they've got to learn how to use some type of technology to be able to teach their kids and engage their kids through technology, which is going to be totally different than face-to-face. And so we see that happen. And so those skills are a piece that people got dropped in everybody's lap at the last minute. There has to be some feedback for the team. Feedback should include both goals and desired behaviors. Feedback requires diagnosis to take place before it is given, and feedback requires evaluation of what the worker is doing well and what areas need work. When we're talking about feedback to a team, it's an underperforming team. And not everybody on that team is probably underperforming, but in general, that team is not meeting the mark. One of the courses I'm working on reading right now, preparing because I want to write this later this year for first of next year, is a course called on project recovery. How do you turn a project around that's sinking, that's biting the dust, that's in the red? And one of the big pieces is that you've got the wrong team members working together. They can't get along, they don't talk. In many cases, they've got baggage for a lot of different things, and so all of those can be part of it. Now, Carty in the book Performance Management made a statement: feedback requires positive comments as well as suggested changes. Feedback includes considerations of how you say the hard things to the team member, and feedback is necessary for change. Now, what this person said that I thought was really good is that this is a verbal kind of conversation that you're having, and you're not just focusing on what's bad. You're talking about what's good. As a professor and I work with doctoral students, I'm a doctoral chair. One of the things I have to really watch is that if I've had a bad day, I give a lot of negative comments and not so many positive. If I'm doing okay, if everything's balanced, I'll give both. And so I'll find myself, if I'm not feeling good or I'm kind of tired or I've had a bad day, I kind of have to scan my comments to that student to make sure I didn't just rip their heart out all the way through with what I've said. And I've said it nice and made some suggestions. And sometimes it's not that you're taking away from anything you're confronting them over. It's that approach. And approach is everything for us. For an example, I'll say something to a doctoral student last night, and I kind of walked through this whole thing telling them how wrong this is that they did. And then underneath it, I said, I have to watch my writing in that same way because I do the exact same thing. Now, for a student, especially a doctoral student, you know that's going to be an A student. As they're reading this, they're going to take it a little bit better if I'm saying at the bottom of this, I do the exact same thing and I have to watch my writing in that area as well. So good luck as you make some of these adjustments. They're going to handle it better with that little softener there than they will if all I say is, hey, let me tell you the 15 things you did wrong. And it's the same thing for people we're talking to. People, we've got to be able to soften it. You're an awesome worker. You do great jobs over here. However, we need to work on this right here and get this up to speed. Okay, so let's look at the next piece then. In order to measure performance, whether it's personally or professionally or whether it's on the project, you're going to have to look at data gathering. And this is where it just gets to be a challenge. We monitor the cost and the time on our project. We'll monitor quality or testing for those of you guys who are working on the technology side, but then that's where a lot of things stop. And so a lot of times what we're having to look at is we're having to then measure something that's not being measured. So like, for an example, how do you map performance? One of the things that happens is as you start looking at performance, you look at it across the board of what skills does someone need? And so that's going to fit your organizational objectives. It's going to fit the core competencies of that particular job. But here's the piece that people a lot of times don't connect with. What kind of behaviors am I wanting? You can be the most brilliant people. Haven't we all seen this? The most brilliant person, but their behaviors are horrible because they're so brilliant, but yet they act out. They don't support the team. And so, and in some cases, it's ego that they realize that they are so brilliant. So there's certain behaviors I want on the team as well. That brings us into this aspect of monitoring people. Here's some performance indicators that will help us be able to monitor people. What about the quality of work they do? What about the accuracy, consistency, frequency, clarity, quantity, time, satisfaction, customer feedback, performance standards. A lot of these different pieces are the indicators that we can bring to the table. Now, you might be saying, wait a second, now I'm not their manager, I'm their project manager. You're absolutely correct. But you can still talk to somebody about their quality of work in the project team. They don't have to report to you if you're their project manager, and still talk about that, or accuracy or consistency or any of these, because you're bringing up that hey, I need this to be accurate, because you're banking on those numbers being true, because you're reporting them to other people. Now, when you look at the performance effort matrix, where you've got effort and stability, if you're looking all the way down to the lowest level of effort and lowest level of stability, you're looking at luck. Personally, I don't believe in luck, but that's what we use as a term. Luck, boy, I was sure lucky today. And then if we look at effort, high effort but low stability, that's the coaching component. If we look at high stability but low effort, once again, wishful thinking, luck and wishful thinking. We just assume that these things are going to take place, but yet we are putting nothing into it. But your highest is going to be what's called proactive planning. That's the highest stability and highest effort, but yet you also are demonstrating that you have some kind of action item connected to that to be able to drive that particular behavior. All right, so let's look at now evaluating the performance itself. So there's methods for measuring performance. For an example, pre and post examinations, observations. Even if I can't do anything else, I can still observe you're not interacting with the team, or you're dominating the team. Surveys, graphs from charting, comparisons to industry standards. We can do a lot of different things when we're looking at measuring performance, both on the project and with the people. But most of us, if we ask you who your top performers were on the project teams that you're working with, you would know exactly. And then most of you also would come back and say, let me tell you who the loser is. And so, I mean, don't be shouting that name out. So we're videoing this, okay? But most of us know who the top performer is and who the loser is on that team, and we have a tendency to be frustrated between the two, and yet both of these are going to happen. And so you're measuring that performance some way as you do that. We also have modification of employee skills. Remind them of the policy, the process, the behavioral change that are standard that you need. A lot of different things can be used to be able to talk to somebody about how they've acted, or what kind of behaviors they have. I don't spend a lot of time on attitude. We talked about this in another webinar. I spend my time on behavior or performance, because you're going to get a bigger bang out of that. Also meet with them on a weekly basis, kind of coach them a little bit and kind of see what they're doing. Let's say, for an example, you've got somebody who doesn't know, who's not doing very good on project planning or planning their piece of the pie. So you meet with them for 10 minutes and kind of look and see what they've planned for themselves every few days or for that week. And that's just a little bit of the coaching that you do. Observe their actions informally, conduct yearly performance reviews or feedback sessions. That's easier as a manager in a formal organization, but many organizations are letting project managers do this too, because you're working so closely with these folks. Now let's look at the performance gap for just a moment and kind of help with this, make that transition in your head, okay? So on the left-hand side, you've got the present state. This is where the employee is right now. On the right-hand side, you've got the future state. Now this can be true for you and I as well, okay? So on the present state, this is where we are. We know where we are. We know what we don't have. It could be credentials we don't have. It could be degrees we don't have. It could be skills we don't have, behaviors we don't have. But we know over here on the future state, this is where we really do want to be. So how do you get that person over there? Well, that's the part in the middle is called the performance gap. So we could train them, but training is not enough to get everybody over there. I can train somebody, but then if they don't use that training, or that training doesn't fit their culture, communication, clarification of the goals have to fit, empowerment, and then I have to remove those roadblocks, whatever the roadblocks are, to be able to move them over to that future state. And sometimes the roadblocks are them themselves, you and I ourselves. And the reason is because what happens is we don't think we can learn that. Do you remember years ago, people, when technology first started hitting, people didn't think they could learn the technology. They didn't think they could learn how to use a computer or certain programming. Well, of course you can. It's repetition. But that doesn't mean that's not stressful, and it doesn't mean that it's easy. Procedures and performance management connect to be able to drive this a little bit better for us. We observe the employee's level of work, gather data and information, talk about any issues immediately, develop training and PDP, that's professional development plan is what PDP is, and give positive as well as negative feedback. And so what you're looking at here is not that all you're getting is this positive glowing results. That's awesome. But for the person to say, okay, here's a couple areas that we want to work on here. We want to beef this up just a little bit. Then observation, we talked about that as being one of the methods. I can observe you and watch you and see how you're doing, seeing how you're acting. We allow our immediate impressions sometimes to distort the performance. So what happens is if our immediate impressions were good, then I assume you've got good performance all the time. But if our immediate impression was bad, I assume then you're giving me bad performance all the time. So we have to realize that observation sometimes is only as good as the last time I observed you. We may judge their performance with no data and no backup. And this is where you have to be careful because of biases. If I like you, I'm going to have a tendency to think that you're doing better. If I don't like you, you just frustrate the stew out of me. And what happens is I have a tendency to evaluate you worse because, once again, it's that likability piece. We fail to be fair sometimes in our expectations. We expect something at this level that we really probably couldn't perform ourselves if we wanted to, but we're expecting it out of someone else. And especially if you struggle with that perfection, you're kind of that, you're that perfection person. You frustrate people because the goal is so high. There can always be something else they can do differently or better, and sometimes that's going to be very frustrating to people around us. And we're influenced by the horn and the halo effect. One of the examples that you read about is that you'll have an older person who still is in leadership, and they will hire a younger person, and they'll have a halo effect over that younger person. The younger person reminds them of their daughter or of their grandchild or something like that, and so they kind of protect them and cocoon them to where they're kind of untouchable, and that's a halo effect. They look at their performance as being just awesome, or they have sympathies for that level because of who they are. Now, when you look at the halo and the horn effect, we do that as well. So the halo effect would be, for an example, let's put it in a performance setting, scoring or rating an employee during the performance evaluation at a high level, which is not real. Because I like that person, we're friends, we're connected. Thinking a person is doing a better job than he or she really is doing, that once again, that can be that halo effect as well, because you kind of like them. And the horn effect is the exact opposite. And so think about it, and as we walk through this, the scoring or rating of an employee during the performance evaluation at a low level, which is maybe not real either, because they have a personality that puts them off, or kind of a gripey kind of thing. Thinking a person is doing less work than he or she really is doing, we see that a lot of times in the horn effect. And so, because once again, I don't like that person very well, and their personality is kind of frustrating to me. The other piece is going to be favoritism on a halo effect. I let them have the choice jobs. Compatibility. Blind spot. I have a blind spot. I don't even notice that I'm treating you with more favorability. Or if you have been a past high performer, but maybe you're not a past high performer now. Great future potential. You'll see this where this person's coming in, and I think this person's going to really be awesome in 5 years, but right now they're really struggling. Or an intimidation. I'm afraid of you. And occasionally you'll find people who are afraid to confront certain people in their workplace. And if that's the case, that has to be dealt with, because what you have is you've got the worker who's calling the shots, and that manager is closing their eyes to it. On the horn side, dislike for the team or group, difficult or irritating personality, less skills, less education, a highly visible failure. So this person had a failure earlier in the year, and it was very visible. And so what happens is all of us are just growling about all of that. Unattractive qualities or dislikes. Maybe they aren't attractive. We see this all the time where people are very biased in hiring people. And so you put a person who is overweight, and how many times have we seen that on the news where that person did not get a job when the news anchor went undercover as a large person compared to a thin person. So let's be real here. We do have biases that we need to be careful of. And then also dislike for personal views. Maybe the person is a staunch Republican or Democrat. Maybe the person is a staunch religious nut and everything's religion. And so we have a tendency to get to deal with that person, and we don't like what we're seeing with them as we go back and forth with them. Okay, so let's look at performance levels a lot of times for people. Sometimes people just take the easiest path in doing a performance level. And so, like for an example, outstanding. We all love outstanding, don't we? We love to get those accolades, but we're not outstanding usually in every area. Employees have wowed you and meet all the goals, the deadlines, the highest quality work. Absolutely, there's going to be some there. Good, this employee meets the goals, deadlines with excellent quality, but they're not the wow level, but they're doing a good job. Average, employee reached many of the goals, deadlines with a reasonable amount of quality. Below would be the employee missed numerous goals and deadlines and the quality was less than desired. And then last would be poor, where the employee work habits are terrible, goals and deadlines are almost never met, and quality is terrible. Now, I think what you're looking at here is, when we look at this, we think, oh yeah, I understand this is performance levels. How are you going to measure the performance of people when the next 18 months they're working online? How do you know if it's outstanding? Only by what they've pumped out. You're going to do the same thing to your workers the same way I do with my online and students. If they don't say it in a paper, if they don't show it in a paper, then my assumption has to be they didn't do it. On your side, if they don't produce that report, if they don't attend that meeting, if they don't do those particular items that show you outputs, then you're not going to be able to measure it either. And the reason is because I'm not seeing you set across the desk from me day in and day out. But in order to do this, we have to have some type of benchmarking. And so let's give you 4 steps here for benchmarking. We've got to arrange what we're going to benchmark. We've got to analyze it to see what levels it needs to be, because my level might be far lower than your level. We need to appoint who's in charge of those particular pieces. That means where you're going to have that assignment, that job responsibility, and then what actions you want out of them. That's that behavior. That's that output that we're talking about. So let's look at a range. What areas of the job should be measured? Are the measurements realistic for that employee? What documentation, what data are we needing for that person? Because that's what you're looking at. And once again, every person is not going to be expected to do the same thing. You're an expert. You've been doing that 20 years. I expect more out of you than the new employee who's been there just a few months. Analyze. Here's your questions for analyzing. What's the current level of performance? What's the level of performance needed for this position? And what hurdles will be faced as they do this? What skills should be implemented first? And what processes will be impacted as you start analyzing this? So let me give you an example of this particular piece right here. Let me see how we're doing on time. We're doing okay real quick. All right, so let's say for an example, you are training, you're training 911 operators. Some of the skills that we have for that 911 operator is they've got to be able to handle crisis, because every phone call is a potential crisis. They've got to be able to handle it fast, and they've got to be able to think with a clear head and handle the stress long term. And so that would be something that would be the baseline for anyone we hire for that. So if this person can't handle stress, I don't want them as a 911 operator. They're going to tell somebody something wrong. They've got to calm them down. They've got to be able to work with that person in a stressful situation to get them help. So when I'm analyzing that type of person, I want to make sure I've got somebody who's as calm as possible, even though we all know that a 911 operator is a hard position. It would be difficult to go from crisis to crisis all day long, every day. The other thing would be when appointing, you're creating goals, objectives, you're communicating the findings, you're gaining buy-in. This is something that comes with those people skills and those soft skills. People aren't going to buy in just because you're the project manager or you're the leader. Follow me, I'm leader. That's not how that works. They lead, you lead, and you've got to be able to demonstrate that leadership. And you've got to be able also to be able to get these people to get on board to follow you. The other side of that is what kind of behaviors, what kind of outputs, what kind of action do you want? And this is where you're creating action plans, design a monitoring process, building and adjusting benchmarks and regrouping. Why? Because you're trying to take that person to the next level and the next level, the next level. I see my buddy on here, Tony Rusing, and for many of you, you don't know Tony, but Tony and I have been friends 30 years. He does training all over the world, and one of the things that was interesting, and I'll tell my version of the story so that so we get it right here. Tony and I both presenting at different places, and our company was brand new. Tony had been doing this for a lot of years, and he was somebody who came alongside, and we got to be friends, and he coached me, and he started giving me some pointers about speaking, but also about fees and other things that you would not normally know. And it really helped because these are gaps that you're not going to know in a lot of places. And so what happened was he was willing to share. And of course, we've been friends for all these years, and we laugh. We'll laugh about stuff that we talked about 30 years ago. But the actions you're wanting out of a person, sometimes you're having to fill that gap. People don't know what the gap is. We assume they do, but they might not know what that gap is. There's also some techniques for evaluating gaps. And so time required to do a job. When we do estimating, this is huge for us. Who is going to be that resource you're going to use? Is it your A team or is it your B team? Good people, wonderful people, but they don't have the same level of expertise. What about the level of performance or accuracy do you need? If we're doing something with a lot of accuracy, a level of performance that means accuracy on everything, you probably have somebody who is that nitpicky person who you want to do that because you know it's going to be perfect. Team interaction, adaptability, communication and reporting, cost, customer satisfaction, quantity. We can measure in a lot of different ways, but the point is we've got to figure out how we can measure this. So we're looking at two sides to this. The performance gap is a piece of, is what we're coming out of this conversation with. And so what's my desired level of performance for that person and what's their present level? And so everything between that is that performance gap. And so we've got to come up with a plan or a strategy to be able to get them from the present level to the desired level. And that's going to be true. And then once they get to the desired level becomes the present level, and then we're ready to go again. How can I get them to the next level? So this is not a promotion on a job, it's the skill level, it's the competency capabilities that we have for that particular person. Now, training is a piece of it to help with that performance gap. Where will training assist you in performance? Where will training help the least? Where does the worker have the most control? And I want you to keep the word control in your head. Anytime I'm looking at performance, I always want to look through the eyes of how much control did the worker have over this piece. And so a lot of times, this is one of our challenges when we get into this issue on projects. They were project team members and project managers were given the deadline, they were given the budget, they were given the schedule, and then we want to hold the project manager accountable for why things went haywire. They had no control over anything, but yet they're accountable for that. And so that's one of those challenges that we look at. All right, let's look at performance diagnosis, identifying the performance needs. Point out the level and behavioral language to someone that you need their performance to be. Point out the consequences for not meeting the new level. Point out the reward for reaching the new level of performance. Could it be money or responsibility or recognition or promotion? And here's the sad thing is it might not be any of those except that they know that they've done an awesome job and they've met that level. And that's one of the, that's a huge motivational piece as well. I can do this. I've reached that. I love talking to people after they've passed their PMP test. And the reason is because they've worked their can off trying to get it. And then when they get it, they start talking about how glad they are to have that behind them. And absolutely, that's going to be a piece of it.
This gave me a boost on his during his workshop. Yeah.
All right, then next would be take inventory. Is this a defection from the job description? Is this a process or procedure problem? Is this a cultural or bureaucratic problem? Because all of these have a different power structure. Is it a defect from job description, meaning the person's not doing what we've hired them to do? Then that's going to be a no-brainer. Is this a process or a procedure problem? So do we have a bad process going on? Is this a cultural or a bureaucratic problem? So this would be management, or this is the kind of our internal culture. See, that's going to be a bigger structure as well in trying to change that. Okay, so let's look at it from an organizational standpoint. So what influences the organization? And so we come at it from several different aspects here. So you've got customer retention, You got detailed planning, management practices, employee development, change tolerance, and then supportive culture. That's what it's going to take to make an organization good. So if we can't retain our customers, then we're losing business like crazy. Then it dominoes into those other places. If we can't develop our employees to be able to not only to do what we want them to do today, but we want them to do in the future, then we're not going to be able to keep everything going. If our management practices do not support the employees and allow management to lead, then we've got problems in all these other areas. So the point is, it takes all of this as a package to be able to move forward with these areas. So what's the benefits then of benchmarking? Increase individual quality, establish worker buy-in, adjust internal goals and standards, lay a foundation for others' ideas, increase the level of overall performance. Now, a lot of times somebody thinks, well, you're increasing their performance, you're just trying to get more work out of them just for the heck of it. No, you're trying to increase their performance. It's their skill level. It's their core competency level. You want them to be a better employee. If they choose to go anywhere else, I'm going to invest into their life right now, because if they do choose to go someplace else, that's fine. That's their call. But while I've got them, I can utilize them to the best way possible. So what areas do I want to benchmark? Okay, focus on the main indicators or priority areas. Focus on any lagging indicators. Where are they struggling? Understand that not all areas are going to be the best. I think that's unrealistic when people think I've got 10 core competencies, I want them to be the best in all areas. That's probably not realistic with most of us. And then seek out correct and trustworthy benchmarks. Establish corrective actions for each people so that you can help them be able to bridge that gap. And that's going to be a huge piece of benchmarking and making that change with everyone. Now, here's some areas that you can benchmark an employee to just double check. What about worker turnover? If I've got a manager that's having a lot of turnover for workers, then that's usually a problem. Safety, obviously, performance, training, planning, grievances. If you're an organization that has grievances, and a lot of people are filing grievances, not because you got a grievance, but you know what I'm talking about. This is the pattern. This person's getting a bunch of these. Morale. Everybody in this who worked for this person, it's really the morale is really terrible. Recognition, promotions, knowledge transfer, being able to take the knowledge we have and transfer it to other people. Most of you heard on the news in the last few weeks something that shocked most people, and that is that on the Ellen show that they had a hostile work environment. That was reported, and so people just started questioning all kinds of things. And almost every newscast, they said it was not Ellen, it happened to be the producers of the show. Well, a few weeks into this, and now if you heard the news in the last couple of days, she fired 3 of her 5 producers. And so they got rid of them. Why? Because once again, you can't close your show out and have a theme of being nice to people, and on the other side, it's a hostile work environment. And so that, that's not going to work. And so she cleaned house. And so down the road, it'll take a while for them to build up the reputation again. But the point is, that's going to be one of those things that comes out. The other thing is going to be coaching performance toward the goals. Discuss the purpose of the evaluation or the coaching session. And so you can coach for good stuff as well as bad stuff. You can make it a habit to observe the performance or the behavior to be discussed, and brag on people when you see them do something good. Conduct a post-observation meeting if you need to show them, okay, you've picked up 2 of those 5 competencies that we're working on. Set up an improvement plan with due dates with that person of how you're going to work with them or check with them. All of these, whatever you're measuring, is going to cause that person to focus on those areas, and that's going to help them be better in those skills. All right, now let me stop right here for just a second and handle some questions or comments. We've got a few minutes, so we can handle that. What questions do you have, or what comments do you have before we look at our last 2 slides real quick? Questions or comments? All right, so let me look at the last couple of things. Let me mention a couple of little pieces to you. I don't know that this is on our website because we made the decision yesterday, but we have been asked over and over again to have a PMP boot camp on the weekends. And so we have one scheduled in October. It will run 4 Saturdays in a row. And so it is going to be the full PMP boot camp. The cost for that is $14.50. It will be virtual. And so it will run 4 Saturdays. And so it will run October 1st of November. And it will be $14.50 with the guarantee, $1,100 without the guarantee. So if you would like to be part of the PMP boot camp, but you can't take off and all those type of things, 4 Saturdays, and that will be the same thing. We normally do a 4-day boot camp Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday. So you're going to get the same information. The difference is you're getting it on 4 Saturdays. We also have a virtual business analysis program. That's one of our next virtual instructor-led programs that you're going to be seeing. And so we still have room in that course if you'd like to be part of that. And then, of course, we have 2 more PMP exam prep boot camps that would be either Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday that are virtual. And we have one face-to-face right now, if everything keeps going, in Overland Park, Kansas. We have a class in Overland Park that will be a face-to-face PMP exam prep boot camp this year. And unless Kansas puts more restrictions on, right now we can still meet the guidelines with mask and with social distancing. And so that class will be a run unless Kansas puts stipulations on. We already have enough in that class to run it. So if you want a face-to-face, that would be the one to go in. And here's why. With so many questions about the virus and things like this, most of the training that you're going to see is going to go virtual. All of our boot camps for the first 6 months of next year are going to be instructor-led virtual because we don't know what's going to happen and hotels don't know what's going to happen. So for the first 6 months of next year, the PMP is going to be in virtual settings, and then who knows what's happening. Things are changing on a week-to-week basis. So anyway, that's your little promotion of some things. And so if you've let me stop one more time. Any questions before I let you guys get out of here? All right, well, let me thank you guys so much for being part of this morning. And of course, next month we'll have another topic. We are going to be posting our 2021 topics in the next few days. And so you'll see those on the website. And so we've got all of next year already planned out. And so you'll have an opportunity to see what we're going to be talking about. Project recovery is going to be one of those topics for next year. And there will be a new seminar for next year on that same topic as well. So anyway, thank you so much for being part of this. If I can help you, let me know. And if you've got any questions about anything, just send me an email. We'll process the video and you'll get this video a little bit later today, okay? Thank you guys so much for being here. Have a great week. Bye now. Stay healthy.